Good afternoon, everyone. And dear Minister and dear Special Counselor, dear President Avramescu, dear Gabriel, dear Sorin, dear ladies and gentlemen, and especially also dear Alexander, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for the pleasure to the first time in Romania and in Bucharest. It's a very warm welcome, maybe even too warm, but it's a pleasure. And it's my pleasure to say happy birthday, bon anniversaire, on your 30 year as an association, an organization that in every country, but definitely also in this one, plays a very important role to collect the views of a very important industry and then ensures a dialogue in Europe, with Insurance Europe, but also within the country with all the relevant institutions. And I think we just heard from them. We do not always disagree, we do not always agree, but we have a dialogue. And I think that is important because we do strive to achieve the same, which is a country where people can operate in their businesses, in their schools, in their lives with a peace of mind, because they know that if something happens, they have a way to cover for damages. 30 years, that's a long period. That's quite a milestone. And a lot has happened in the 30 years, also in Europe. This year, we are actually celebrating 20 years of enlargement, and we saw, in 2004, we saw 10 countries join, and Romania joining quite quickly after that. And I think with that, we really brought together the European family. And I know studying in the 90s, starting in the 90s, for me that was a vision, that we would be one Europe and sit together and work together as we do today. And in 2022, we marked 20 years also since we introduced the circulation of European banknotes and coins, which I think is a milestone. And by now, I think there are generations growing up in Europe that don't even know there was a difference in many countries, and others are on the way. Last year, we saw 30-year anniversary of the European single market. You would almost forget how much that is an achievement, that we have so many countries in Europe where just goods, people cross borders, and we operate as a single market. No, it's not perfect, but I think we had a nice discussion yesterday that we can think about how not perfect it is today, and let's improve. But let's also not forget how it was before and how much it has brought us. They're really huge achievements that only came together because of dialogue, because of listening, and they support our continent, and they really underpin the peace and the democracy and the prosperity, and we can never take them for granted. I would really say that Europe is stronger and safer and secure thanks to these developments. And so, even though the expected move to the right was very visible in the elections, and we also see that the bloc of in the middle is steady there to also lead Europe in the next 5 years. But going back to the single market in particular, it has a profound impact on how we live and how we work, guaranteeing the free movement of goods and services and people and capital in the EU. And in insurance, this has brought opportunities to the freedom of establishment and freedom of services that many are providing. And this is a business model that is developing as we speak. We see year on year less groups with subsidiaries and more homes that are selling on the basis of freedom of establishment and freedom of services. These opportunities should work both ways. That's important. It should work for policyholders as well as for insurers. And insurers can benefit from this. They can enter new markets, while consumers can also benefit because they can get more choice and competitive prices. Now here the cross-border element is very important, and there is really a growing role for cross-border in insurance. And don't underestimate that we have about 12% growth rate in premium now cross-border in the EU, and that number is going up. So here the passporting concept in a single market is working. But for that to work, we also need a robust regulatory framework. We need shared ideals, and we also need common approaches. But so far, it does work. I mean, look what we've been going through. We had a pandemic, we had a Russian invasion into Ukraine, and a war that is still ongoing. We had to deal with serious inflation and rising interest rates. And through this all, the insurance industry of Europe has remained stable, reporting good solvency numbers. And I would say that is in no small part really thanks to Solvency II. Now, regulation is not enough. We also need supervision, and here EIOPA champions a common supervisory culture. Anytime you say EIOPA and decisions of EIOPA, the papers of EIOPA, the documents of EIOPA, it's not just me and my team. That's not how EIOPA works. EIOPA is a community of supervisors which takes decision in the board, which is myself and 27 supervisors, including ISF. That's where we work together. That is where we have an aim to promote consistent supervisory practices across Europe. That's where we aim to actually also learn from each other and deal with the new risks, building on common interpretations of laws and regulations, including Solvency II, but also by trusting each other and sharing data and information. That is essential for supervisory convergence, to have supervisors understand each other's practices and behaviors. And we expect the national supervisors to then take appropriate action when they see deficiencies in their market or when they are alerted to deficiencies by colleagues because their insurer, the license they give, is operating in other markets, but maybe not in ways that we would like. This is fundamental for supervisors across Europe because we need supervisors to be willing to be not only willing to act, but also to be able to act if we want to maintain consumer protection and financial stability at a time that passporting is becoming a very big part of the insurance market. And so here I would very much like to thank the colleagues from ASF. Thank you very much for your contribution, not only to supervision in Romania and acting when needed, but also to contribute to EIOPA's work. And while Solvency II and an effective supervision have made the industry more resilient, we still cannot accept that we will never reach the final outcome of having a complete and perfect world. We also need to understand that there can be situations where an insurer will fail. It's still a business. And this is why the Recovery and Resolution Directive that is coming into force as well is very welcome. And I always say, the Recovery and Resolution Directive does one thing and only one thing. It makes sure that if an insurer fails and that particular insurer has a critical role, for example, to pay out pensions in some countries, we cannot have a chaotic wind down. We should really think who should organize the wind down and the resolution of that entity. And if we see that it is critical that this is done in a very careful way, it could be meaningful to have resolution and do so. We've also have to consider the effect on policyholders in the single market. Policyholders should have the same level of protection no matter where they live, no matter where they bought their insurance policy, particularly if they buy that insurance policy from the same insurer, but just in a different country. And this is really not always the case today. And this is why something that the Romanian market already has, an insurance guarantee scheme, but that is essential to have at least a minimum harmonized insurance guarantee scheme in Europe. We all know the example of the Danish insurer that failed, and then only the consumers, the policyholders in Denmark were covered by the guarantee scheme, and all the consumers that bought products from this insurer who was selling on the basis of freedom of services living elsewhere in Europe just lost out. Currently, there's way too much fragmentation on insurance guarantee schemes, if there are any, and they result in very different levels of protection of policyholders, which for us as EIOPA is unacceptable. Another area that is very important, it really is value for money, because value for money affects on the trust. And it's a topic that continues to be very high on our radar. And here I want to stress, really stress that value for money, and when we say that, it is not just about the cost that is reflected in the price. Value for money is that from the moment you develop the good, when you distribute the good, when you sell the good, you make sure that what the consumer is paying for is reflected in the costs, the services, and the returns, not anything else, and that there actually is a return, because otherwise, why would they buy it? So the price of the product has to be proportionate to the benefits of that product and the cost it incurred. It has to be reasonable. So we don't mean that you have to cut all your prices. We don't mean you have to underprice, not at all. You must price for your risk. We truly believe that to have a healthy insurance industry, you need to be able to help for your risk. But it also has to be a fair price that you can explain. Now, I know we're in a period of high inflation. I know we're in a period of rising prices, and for many it might be difficult also financially. But we still asked all the consumers, as part of our consumer trends report, if they think that prices have been rising for their insurance. And a third of consumers said yes. So a third of the consumers in Europe have seen their prices rise. And that is not surprising, because prices went up everywhere, so prices went up. But if we look at the European average, then it was a lot less than in Romania, where 50% of consumers said they saw prices go up. Now, maybe that is less good news, but there's also good news in that same survey, and that is that Romanian consumers do believe that their insurance products do offer them value for money, and that is actually above the European average, interestingly enough. For example, 78% of consumers in Romania believe that their investment or savings product that they got from an insurer offers them value for money, 78%. The European average currently stands at 66. So here is something you're doing very well in your market. Now, with that, I come to a close. What I want to say is that you have such an essential role, and maybe sometimes we need to explain that better. And I'm challenging any time that I have the opportunity, any insurer, to try to explain to me what it is they're doing and not use the word mutualization. Because if you want to really reach the people and reach consumers and reach policyholders, but also reach politicians and policymakers, to explain what is the value of this peace of mind that we have when we go about our business, it is the fact that faith hands out cards. And sometimes you get a lucky card, and sometimes you get a bad card, and you have to deal with that. But insurers hold the whole deck. And because they hold the whole deck, they can actually help to carry that risk for society, because we're in this together. It's a very efficient way for a society to deal with the losses that will come anyway. Car crashes happen, we just heard that. Health, unfortunately, is not always good for everyone. And floods are coming more and more, or droughts. So damages will happen to society, and a society needs to deal with the losses. A government can't cover for everything. That's unsustainable. We don't want to go, I think, through court cases to solve these matters. That's a very expensive route. So insurance really is a good way to deal with that, as long as that industry offers value for money to consumers and explains the value to them. I think we're on a good route for that, definitely here in the dialogue with both the Romanian supervisor and UNSAR. And so being insured in Romania in the next 30 years, I would say, continue to talk to each other, look at the issues you have. How can you move from just motor to widening the protection in your society? How can we deal with climate change? How can we deal with an aging population? How can we deal with the big protection gaps that are coming? I think it is this pooling and sharing that will help going forward. I think it's the cooperation as European supervisors that will bring knowledge and ideas on how to do that, but mostly it will be the dialogue that we have with policyholders, consumers, with the industry, and with us as regulators at the national and the European level. So thanks again for inviting me. I look forward to further dialogue. A happy birthday.